The cobalt in our phones, the oil in our cars, the gold in our banks, an immense share of it, a staggering amount, comes from one place, Africa. It's a continent that holds an estimated 30% of the planet's mineral reserves. When you look at the specifics, the numbers are breathtaking. The Democratic Republic of Congo, or DRC, supplies approximately 70% of the world's cobalt production, an essential component of the batteries that power our digital lives. The continent possesses vast tracts of fertile land and a young, dynamic population. So why? Why is a continent so rich in natural resources home to a reality where nearly half its population lacks basic electricity? Why do the people who live on top of this unimaginable wealth remain among the poorest on the planet? At first glance, it might look like a simple story of poverty, but the truth is, there is much more at stake here. The reason is a devastating paradox, a vicious cycle centuries in the making. This isn't an accident. It's the story of a system built over centuries designed to siphon this wealth away. This is the story of Africa's resource curse. So get your notebooks out, because this video is going to take a trip through history to explain how this system was built, how it operates today, and what it would finally take to break it. Let's start by getting a handle on the sheer scale of this paradox. It is one of the most jarring disconnects in our modern world. According to a recent report from the African Finance Corporation, the continent holds mineral reserves valued at tens of trillions of dollars. Of that, a massive amount of wealth remains completely untapped. To put that in perspective, that undeveloped wealth alone is about 2.5 times the continent's entire annual GDP. This isn't just buried wealth, it is the very foundation of the 21st century global economy. Demand for minerals such as cobalt, lithium, and graphite, all abundant in Africa, is set to surge. The International Monetary Fund estimates that demand for these energy transition minerals will triple by 2030 and quadruple by 2040. Africa is, without exaggeration, the engine room of our technological future. Now, contrast that image of immense globally essential wealth with this reality. Sub-Saharan Africa is home to a staggering share of the world's poorest people, with some reports indicating that about 40% of the global total live there. Nearly 4 in every 10 Africans live in extreme poverty, surviving on less than $2.15 a day. This isn't just about income, it's about the millions who live without reliable electricity, the children who attend schools without books, and the sick who lack access to a clinic. It's a continent where, according to a widely cited African Union report, corruption can cost it an estimated 25% of its GDP each year. Illicit financial flows, primarily carried out by multinational corporations, drain an estimated $88 billion from the continent annually. That's more than it receives in foreign aid. This is the grand paradox. A land of immeasurable riches, yet home to people living in profound poverty. It's the image of a child in the DRC digging for cobalt for $1 a day, while the material they unearth ends up in a $1,000 smartphone. This disconnect isn't a coincidence, it is the direct result of a system. To understand why Africa's people are poor, we have to follow the money, and to do that, we have to go back in time. The roots of Africa's economic paradox weren't planted today. They were systematically embedded over 500 years of exploitation, culminating in the colonial era. It's a common misconception that African history began with Europeans' arrival. Before any colonial power set foot on its shores, Africa was a continent of empires and complex societies with extensive trade networks, from the gold-rich kingdoms of West Africa to the trading power of Aksum in modern-day Ethiopia. That trajectory was violently altered first by the transatlantic slave trade and then by the formal scramble for Africa. At the Berlin Conference of 1884, with no African representation, European powers drew lines on a map, carving up the continent to serve their own economic interests. These arbitrary borders sowed the seeds of future civil wars and ethnic conflicts that continue to destabilize nations. But the primary goal of colonialism was economic. It was designed for a single purpose: to extract Africa's vast natural resources as efficiently as possible for Europe's benefit. A map of colonial infrastructure tells a clear story. The lines don't connect villages to towns to foster internal commerce. Instead, they run from a mine or a plantation directly to a coastal port. Their sole purpose was to move raw materials out of Africa and onto ships. This dig-and-ship model deliberately stifled the development of local manufacturing. Why let a colony build its own textile mills when it could be forced to export raw cotton and then buy back finished cloth at a much higher price? Agriculture was similarly transformed from subsistence farming to cash crop monoculture, undermining local food security. To make it all work, colonial regimes imposed brutal labor systems and heavy taxes. As President Franklin D. Roosevelt noted after a visit to British Gambia in 1943, the exploitation was stark, remarking that for every dollar that the British have put into Gambia, they have taken out 10. So, when independence finally came in the mid-20th century, African nations weren't handed a clean slate. They were left with the fractured, hollowed-out shell of the colonial state. They inherited 1. Arbitrary borders ripe for conflict. 2. Export-dependent economies are built on one or two raw materials. 3. Infrastructure designed for extraction, not internal development. 4. A crippling shortage of educated professionals. 5. And political institutions designed for control, not democracy. The physical chains of colonial rule had been broken, but the economic chains had been forged, tested, and were now stronger than ever. This wasn't the end of colonialism. It was simply the beginning of its next phase, neocolonialism. The dawn of independence should have been Africa's moment, but the colonial system was never truly dismantled. It simply put on a suit and tie. A new set of actors spins this new system of economic control, yet its objective remains the same: to ensure Africa's resources continue to enrich the outside world. The players in this modern game are numerous. First, there are the multinational corporations. They are masters of a practice known as illicit financial flows, sophisticated accounting tricks designed to minimize the profits they declare in the African countries where they operate. One common method is transfer mispricing. A subsidiary in, say, Zambia, mines copper. It then sells that copper at an artificially low price to another subsidiary of the same parent company in a tax haven such as Switzerland. That second subsidiary then sells the copper at its true, much higher price. The vast majority of the profit is recorded in the tax haven, leaving the Zambian government with minimal tax revenue. Through schemes like this, Africa loses an estimated $88 billion every year, money that should be funding schools, hospitals, and roads. These corporations are often enabled by a second set of players: international financial institutions and foreign governments. For decades, loans from the IMF and the World Bank came with strict conditions known as structural adjustment programs that frequently required governments to privatize state-owned industries, often allowing foreign companies to buy national assets at bargain prices. This external exploitation is made possible by the third, and perhaps most tragic player: corrupt local elites. The very nature of a resource-based economy creates fertile ground for corruption, a phenomenon central to the resource curse. When a government's funding comes directly from an oil field or a mine, leaders become more accountable to the foreign firms they do business with than to their own citizens. To make this abstract system brutally concrete, let's follow the journey of a single mineral: cobalt from the Democratic Republic of Congo. The DRC holds about half of the world's cobalt supply, and its untapped mineral wealth has been valued at trillions of dollars, with one widely cited, though speculative, figure putting it at $24 trillion. yet its people are among the poorest on Earth. The story begins in the so-called artisanal mining zone, a euphemism for a desperate and dangerous practice. Men and children descend into unstable, hand-dug tunnels for a few dollars a day, exposed to toxic dust without any protective gear. The cobalt they extract is sold to intermediaries and blended with industrially mined material, making it difficult to trace. The raw ore is then exported, with Chinese firms controlling a large share of processing. By exporting raw ore, rather than processing it domestically, the DRC captures only a tiny fraction of the mineral's final value. This is the dig and ship model in its starkest form. Finally, the refined cobalt ends up in our phones, our laptops, and the electric cars marketed to us as symbols of a clean future. The story of the DRC's cobalt is a miniature of modern Africa. It is a story of immense resource wealth generating unimaginable profits for foreign corporations and corrupt officials. In contrast, the people who own the resource by birthright are left with violence, poverty, and environmental destruction. It is a perfect, devastating illustration of neocolonialism in action. The story of Africa's wealth paradox is a heavy one. But ending the story, there would be to fall for the oldest narrative of all, that of a hopeless continent. The reality is that the conditions that created this paradox are artificial and therefore can be undone. The chains can be broken. The solution is not simple, but its pillars are clear. Pillar 1, industrialization and value addition. The single most critical shift is dismantling the dig and ship model. The real wealth isn't just in the ground, it's in processing. This means not just exporting raw cocoa beans, but building factories to make chocolate. Not just mining iron ore, but forging it into steel. A report by the Africa Finance Corporation highlighted this disparity perfectly. Africa's iron ore at the mine gate is worth a fraction of its potential value as finished steel. For decades, that value has been captured elsewhere. Pillar 2, good governance and fighting corruption. Industrialization cannot succeed in a climate of rampant corruption. The billions lost annually are the lifeblood of development, drained away. This requires full transparency in awarding mining contracts and stronger institutions to hold powerful officials and corporations accountable. There are powerful examples of this working. Botswana stands as a shining exception to the resource curse. After discovering diamonds, its leaders negotiated a deal with the mining company De Beers that ensured the government received a substantial share of the profits. Crucially, they reinvested that revenue responsibly in education, healthcare, and infrastructure, transforming one of the world's poorest countries into an upper-middle income nation. This proves that resource wealth can be a blessing, but only when managed by strong, accountable institutions. Pillar 3, Pan-African unity and intra-African trade. The colonial strategy was divide and rule. It is still often easier for an African country to trade with Europe than with its neighbor. The most ambitious step to change this is the African Continental Free Trade Area, AFCFTA. Ratified by nearly all of the continent's 55 nations, it aims to create the world's largest free trade area by boosting intra-African trade, which has already risen from around 16% to nearly 20%. The AFCFTA can create robust regional value chains and give Africa a more powerful, unified voice in global negotiations. The story of Africa's wealth is one of great injustice. The paradox of rich land and poor people is not a natural state. It is the calculated outcome of a history of exploitation. But history is not destiny. Painting Africa as a perpetual victim misses the other half of the story, the one being written in factories turning raw resources into finished products. in courtrooms holding leaders to account, and in trade agreements knitting the continent's economies together. The challenges are immense. Reversing centuries of systemic damage requires monumental effort and political will. But the ingredients for success are all in place. The wealth is there, the resources are there, the young, determined people are there. The final, crucial ingredient is a system that works for Africa, not against it, one in which the continent's incredible wealth is finally used to enrich the lives of its own people. Reporting on important topics like this one takes time, care, and real resources. If you believe these are the conversations we need to have and want to see more deep dives into the forces shaping our world, subscribe and turn on notifications. Thank you for watching.